Hello, my name is Rain. For 20 years, I folded sheets, tracked medications, cooked soft meals, and kept a dying house breathing for a woman who never once called me family. Then one afternoon, I overheard her say to a stranger, "She's not my daughter, she's just a free servant." I wish I could say I was shocked, but the truth, that sentence didn't break me. It confirmed something I had known in the quiet for a very long time. They never saw me, but what if I told you? I wrote everything down, and when I left nothing but silence and the truth I had buried under their comfort. Do you want to hear what happened next? It was still dark when I woke up, the kind of darkness that didn't care what time it was, just that it still had control over the house. I didn't need an alarm. My body had been trained, year after year, to rise before the sky turned pale. The hallway creaked the same way it had for the past 2 decades. The medicine organizer blinked red on the kitchen counter, reminding me which pills were due. I checked the chart I'd laminated and taped beside the microwave. 3 pink, 2 blue, 1 white. Breakfast would be oatmeal again. She couldn't chew much anymore. I moved quietly, not because anyone was sleeping. Marlin could snore through a freight train, but because I'd learned that silence was my safest language. 20 years in this house. That thought rolled through my head as I stirred the pot on the stove. 20 years since I moved in, thinking it was temporary. A few months, maybe, just until Vera got back on her feet. But her first stroke was worse than the doctors expected, and somehow a few months blurred into decades. Celine had her career. Oren had kids. I didn't have either. So I became the one who could help. Somehow, I became the default. When I walked past the closed bedroom door, I could hear Marlin shifting in bed. No greeting, no good morning. He'd say later he didn't hear me. He never did. By the time the sun started crawling through the blinds, I'd already packed Vera's tote for the hospital. Her sweater, the low-sodium crackers she liked, her crosswords, the hand cream she always asked for but never used. The ambulance would arrive at 9. I called Celine the night before. She said, "Thanks for handling it. You always know what to do." Then she hung up before I could ask for help. The ER smelled like bleach and old sadness, the kind that lingers in the vents. After they settled Vera into a room, the nurse smiled at me. "You must be her daughter. You've got that look." I hesitated. "I'm her daughter-in-law," I said. The nurse didn't flinch. "Still counts." I didn't answer. It didn't. Oren arrived an hour later, in a crisp shirt and with coffee in hand. He brought one for me, but it was sweetened. He always forgot I preferred it black. He handed it to me with a casual smile. How's the Queen doing?" "Stable," I said. "She's lucky to have you, Rain. I mean, God, if it were me, I wouldn't last a week. But you've always had that caretaker bone. You were born for this, huh?" I smiled, just enough to end the moment. Around midday, I brought Vera her tea, chamomile, 2 drops of honey, no lemon. I walked down the corridor toward her room, her mug in hand, the sleeve of my sweater pulled over my palm so the heat wouldn't burn. Just before I turned the corner, I heard her voice, her real voice, not the one she used when nurses were around. "She thinks she's family," Vera said. I froze mid-step. Another voice, a woman's, someone I hadn't heard before, chuckled lightly. "She's not my daughter. She's just a free caregiver. A free servant, really." My grip loosened. The mug tilted. A splash of tea hit my wrist, but I didn't feel it. She kept talking. No cost, no contract, no inheritance. Just a woman too good at pretending to belong. I didn't walk into that room. I didn't say a word. I backed away slowly, like I'd stepped into the wrong house and didn't want to disturb the people inside. Outside, I sat in my car with the engine off, windows fogging. My hands trembled, not from the cold but from something else, something older than rage. Maybe it was the sound of that word. Servant. I had made every meal for 20 years. I had missed my father's funeral because Vera had a fall. I had slept on a cot in her room when the power went out during the ice storm of '09. I had massaged her feet when her circulation slowed. I had spoon-fed her applesauce when she couldn't lift her hands. And yet, in her mind, I was just a convenient arrangement, not family, not even friend, a servant. I sat there until the tea stain on my sleeve dried and the sun slipped low behind the trees. That night, I came home to silence. Marlon was in the living room, half watching a baseball game, the volume too low to follow. I didn't tell him what I heard. I didn't need to. He wouldn't have been surprised. I made dinner as usual, rice, grilled chicken, a salad he wouldn't eat. We sat at the table, the clinking of silverware louder than either of us. Marlon glanced up halfway through his plate and said, "You know, Mom was saying the same thing earlier. You're the one constant around here." I looked at him. My fork paused midair. He smiled like it was a compliment. "It's good, you know. Steady. She needs that." I didn't answer. I just nodded once, quietly. But something inside me had changed. It didn't shatter. It didn't scream. It simply split. And I knew deep down that no amount of glue would put it back the same way. I typed my name first, just to remember I still had one. After closing the laptop, I lay in bed next to Marlon, the light from his phone screen flickering across the ceiling. He was still scrolling, probably through sports scores or whatever financial news made him feel relevant. I watched the shadows play across the room, and for once, I didn't feel like part of it. The next day passed in the same rhythm I'd grown to expect. Muffled movements, whispered expectations, and no questions. Around noon, Celine called to say she was organizing a dinner in honor of Vera's resilience. The woman had spent less than 48 hours in the hospital and returned home just as bitter as before. Still, I nodded through the call. Celine liked the sound of her own voice, and she didn't need mine chiming in. By late afternoon, the house was filled with the aroma of roast chicken and rosemary. I'd spent hours prepping, basting, chopping. Vera had always been particular, and tonight was no exception. She wanted it just right, which meant every dish had to be arranged with surgical precision. Marlon, as always, stayed out of the kitchen. He had taken a phone call in the living room, laughing a little too loudly at something Oren said. I heard my name once, then silence. Celine arrived 20 minutes late, dressed in a cashmere coat and heels far too impractical for November in Spokane. The wind was picking up, cold seeping through the windows like it had its own agenda. She kissed Vera's cheek, loud and performative, then turned to me and said, "You've done such a great job. I don't know how you do it." She never waited for an answer. She never really wanted one. By 6, the table was set, the wine was poured, and guests had gathered. Oren showed up with a bottle of red and some half-warm bakery rolls that Vera praised like they were hand-kneaded by angels. I stood behind my chair, waiting for everyone to sit. Vera took her seat at the head of the table, as if she were presiding over a kingdom. Her eyes scanned the spread like a general surveying a battlefield. Then the MC stood up, an old friend of Celine's, someone I barely knew, and began reading a note from Vera. "I want to thank Celine for organizing this lovely evening," she read aloud, "and Oran for arranging the caterer." There was a pause, a beat that held my breath captive. "And the youngest one for handling kitchen prep." The room chuckled politely. I didn't. No one said my name, not once. The word rain had vanished. I had become the youngest one, as if I were a line item on a grocery list. I smiled the way people do when they realize the joke is on them and everyone else is in on it. Dinner went on. Celine made a toast, clinking her glass dramatically, thanking Mom for her strength and grace. Oran made a quip about Vera being too stubborn to go anywhere, which drew laughter. Vera beamed. I served the carrots. Later, as plates were being cleared, I overheard Marlon speaking to one of the guests near the fireplace. "She's always been the dependable one," he said, not realizing I was within earshot. "Rain doesn't complain, she just gets it done," the guest replied. "It's nice to have someone with no ego in the house. That's rare these days." My hands didn't shake, but something under my ribs tightened. At the sink, Vera passed behind me and muttered, "Not everyone can handle being the help. You do it naturally." I didn't turn. I just rinsed the plate in my hand and stacked it. The water scalded, but I let it run. Later that night, in our bedroom, I climbed under the blanket while Marlon lay propped up on pillows, phone in hand. "I was thinking," I started carefully, "maybe it's time we consider getting some help." He didn't look up. "Help with what?" "With your mother," I said. "Just a few days a week. So I can maybe breathe a little." He finally looked over, not with concern, but annoyance. "Seriously, are we doing this now?" He interrupted. "She needs consistency, not strangers poking around. You know her meds. You know how she gets. You're the only one who can keep her calm." I stared at him. "And Rain, you don't quit family," he added. I swallowed hard, not from emotion, just to clear the lump of disbelief that had settled in my throat. "They already quit me," I said softly. He didn't respond. After he drifted off, I slipped out of bed, quietly, so the floorboards wouldn't wake him. I walked down the hall, opened my laptop, and sat in the dining room under the soft hum of the ceiling light. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Rain Trask." Then underneath it, "For 20 years, I was more function than person." I didn't know what it would become. Maybe just a journal, maybe something else. But for the first time in a very long while, I saw my name in writing, and it looked like it belonged to someone. I wasn't in the photo, but I was the one holding the camera. That thought kept circling my brain as I pulled the box from under the bed. The cardboard was worn soft at the edges, and I had scribbled "household" in black marker years ago. Inside were photo albums, mismatched envelopes with receipts, faded greeting cards, decades of moments saved because no one else bothered to. It was early morning. The sky was still a dull slate, the kind of overcast that told you the sun wouldn't be showing up today. I didn't bother turning on the light. I worked in silence, only the quiet crinkle of old paper filling the room. This wasn't nostalgia. This was inventory. 2 hours later, the house started to stir. The floor creaked under Marlon's weight in the hallway, the same way it had every day for as long as I could remember. He walked past the doorway, glanced in at me sitting cross-legged among piles of documents, and asked, "You organizing something?" I didn't look up. "Just sorting through memories." He chuckled like I'd made a joke, then disappeared into the bathroom. The day passed in fragments. I folded laundry, reheated leftovers, sat with Vera through her crossword. She didn't mention the scrapbook I left on her nightstand the night before. I wasn't surprised. Later, as the afternoon light dimmed into that pale gray of an impending drizzle, the family gathered again. Vera's birthday, her 82nd, called for a quiet celebration, which still somehow meant I cooked for 8 people. Marlon brought home a sheet cake. Celine arrived in pearls, and that smug tone she always wore when she wanted to remind me how well she aged. Oran came too, just long enough to hand off a card and kiss Vera's hand like she was royalty. After dinner, Celine stood in the living room and presented a gift, a deep red cashmere scarf, monogrammed, tied with a crisp satin ribbon. "Oh, darling," Vera cooed, draping it over her shoulders. "This is perfect. Such taste. Such elegance." She turned her face upward, waiting for a kiss, which Celine delivered with practiced grace. Then Vera noticed the small package I had placed on the side table hours before, wrapped simply in brown paper tied with blue string. "What's this?" she asked, already sounding unimpressed. I stepped forward. "It's from me. I've been working on it for a few weeks." She untied it slowly, pulled the book from the wrap, and flipped through a few pages. Photos, appointment notes, hospital visits, handwritten schedules, medication logs, all carefully organized, 20 years of care documented, chronologically, with tabs. She gave a polite smile, the kind you give to a child who brings home a crooked clay mug. "Oh, documents," she said. "That's thoughtful, but not really something to show off." Celine leaned over, clearly uncomfortable with the pause. "Mom, look how detailed it is. Rain really put her heart into that." Vera waved her hand. "It's fine, but this scarf, this will look great in church." I felt my ears burn, but I smiled anyway. That was the game, right? Smile and swallow, like I'd been trained. The rest of the evening passed in soft conversation and clinking glasses. I kept busy in the kitchen, wiping counters that were already clean. Celine laughed from the living room about something Oran had said. Marlon was on the couch, watching but not hearing anything. I felt like a ghost moving among furniture. After everyone left, I started cleaning up. As I passed through the hallway, I saw the new canvas print on the wall, a family photo, big, beautiful, professionally taken. Everyone was there, Vera in the center, flanked by her children, Oran and his wife, Celine with her perfect posture, Marlon, arms casually around their mother, the grandkids scattered around them like ornaments. I had taken that picture. No one asked me to be in it. No one even asked if I wanted a version for myself. I stood there for a long moment, letting that quiet realization settle in. Not anger, something colder. I wasn't even forgotten. I was excluded, deliberately. I slipped out of my apron, folded it neatly, and laid it on the hallway bench. In the mirror opposite the canvas, I caught my reflection. My face looked blurred, less solid, less defined, like I was halfway in a dream. I tilted my head, studied the woman looking back at me. She had crow's feet and a tired mouth, but her eyes were still trying to hold something. "You've kept receipts for everything," I whispered to her. "But no one ever asked for the bill." I turned, walked back to my room, and pulled the scrapbook from the side table. I opened to the last page, where Vera's discharge paperwork was filed, and added a note in the corner with a black pen. Invisible, despite showing up. Then I closed the book and slid it back under my bed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Marlon snored beside me, undisturbed by anything beyond his own dreams. I stared at the ceiling, replaying it all, Vera's hands on Celine's scarf, the missing photo, the polite smiles. And a thought struck me. Not bitter, just clear. If I disappeared tomorrow, no one's routine would change. But I wouldn't just vanish, not quietly. Tomorrow I'd begin. I was invisible, but I had the power to write myself back into the story. That morning, I didn't make oatmeal. I didn't check the pill chart. I didn't brew Vera's tea. I just sat at the dining room table, fingers resting on my laptop keys, letting the silence answer for me. Around 10, I heard Marlon laughing in the living room, that kind of laugh that only came out when he was talking to his sister. It wasn't the warm kind. It was the kind men used when they were trying to sound in control, like nothing could touch them. I looked over at my phone. Nothing. No missed calls, no messages, just stillness. Then his voice rose again, and I caught the words, Celine, timeline, and nurse check-in. I stood up and walked quietly toward the hallway, stopping just shy of the archway that led to the living room. His phone screen glowed in his hand. I saw a group chat filled with familiar names: Celine, Oren, Vera's private nurse, even the woman next door who occasionally brought over banana bread. My name wasn't there, not once. I stood there long enough to see a message pop up. Rain will probably handle it, like always. No one corrected it. No one asked if I had time or if I even knew what it was. That evening, after the house settled and Marlon retreated to the back patio with a beer and his ignorance, I sat in bed and asked him, "Why am I not in the family chat?" He didn't even look away from the game. "It's mostly logistics. Celine said you're busy enough already." I nodded, even though it felt like someone had unplugged my chest. I guess even my silence had been rebranded. Busy. Not excluded, just too occupied to matter. Later, I curled up on the couch, scrolling through the cloud photo storage account Marlon shared with the rest of his family. I knew I shouldn't have looked, but I needed to know. Needed confirmation that I hadn't imagined how absent I'd become. There were hundreds of photos, picnics, holidays, birthdays, events I had cooked for, cleaned up after, planned. But in picture after picture, I was behind the camera or completely missing. When I did appear, I was blurry in the background, carrying something or cleaning something up. None of them had my name in the tags. Not one caption mentioned me. It was like watching my own erasure in real time. The next day, Marlon updated his Facebook cover photo. I saw it as I passed by his open laptop, something he forgot to close before stepping into the shower. A family picnic from last summer. I remembered every detail, how I'd made the sandwiches, packed the cooler, drove Vera to the park because she said Oren's car made her nauseous. I had taken that photo, arranged everyone, made sure Vera was shaded, and Celine had the right angle for her hair. And there I was, nowhere. The caption, Kittredge Bloodline, Summer 24, Bloodline, not bond, not effort or presence or sacrifice, just a lineage I didn't belong to. I shut the laptop without a word, walked to the kitchen, sat at the counter with a notepad. I wrote down one word at the top, record. Then I opened my laptop, created a blank document, and typed the new title, Record of Service, Not Employment. No formatting, no fluff. I began listing everything: dates, doctor appointments, therapy cycles, prescription pickups, grocery runs, calls to insurance, emergency room visits, equipment I'd ordered, bills I'd paid in cash because they were small enough not to bother the family fund. Each line was mechanical, exact. I used bullet points, dated every entry. When I couldn't remember specifics, I left notes to verify later. It became a rhythm, tap, tab, return, like a heartbeat, cold, steady, undeniable. There were no tears, no background music, just me and the sound of truth taking shape. By the time the document hit 30 pages, my hands ached. But it wasn't exhaustion, it was release. The same way people talk about finally cleaning out a drawer they've avoided for years. That night, I left the lamp on and climbed into bed beside Marlon. He scrolled through his phone like always. I didn't speak, but after a while, he said, "You okay?" I didn't flinch. "I'm organizing my contributions," I said. since no one else will." He didn't reply, just kept scrolling. I turned off the light, and as the room slipped into darkness, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone's wife. I felt like someone who'd just begun building her exit. If I wasn't in the family, then I'd keep records like someone who knew she was temporary. The rain had turned into sleet by midnight. The windows buzzed with the steady tap of ice forming on the glass. I waited until the television clicked off in the living room and Marlon's heavy footsteps passed the study. When the bedroom door shut with that soft finality, I moved. I had memorized the sound of that file cabinet drawer years ago. I knew which part creaked when you pulled too hard and which folders stuck together. Marlon never let me near it, said it was too messy or it wasn't worth the confusion. But I had made a copy of the key when we refinanced the house in 2011. He never asked for it back. The cabinet was cold, metal biting through my pajama sleeves. The folders were still color-coded, red for taxes, blue for bills, yellow for personal records. I didn't know what I was looking for until I saw the green tab, estate planning. My fingers didn't shake. They just moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Vera's living trust was thick. Dozens of addendums, notarized signatures, and revised pages. I flipped through carefully, my eyes scanning for one thing. My name. Primary beneficiary, Celine Kittredge Tall. Secondary, Orrin Kittredge. Durable power of attorney, Marlon. Healthcare proxy, also Marlon. There was no mention of me. Not in the margins, not in the emergency instructions, and at the bottom of the summary page, a sentence that cut deeper than anything I had heard spoken aloud. No legal or financial responsibility attributed to caregiver. That word again, caregiver, not wife, not daughter-in-law, not even Rain. I sat there for a long time, letting the heat from the table lamp warm one side of my face. I thought about all the nights I slept in a chair next to Vera's bed. The nights I cleaned vomit off her pillow. The birthdays I spent arranging her pills instead of blowing out candles with friends I no longer had. In this house, I wasn't a person. I was a service. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Marlon always left the bread in too long. I was still in my robe, the document resting on my lap like a verdict, when Vera shuffled into the room with her walker. I placed the paper aside and poured her coffee. She sat down without a word. "Vera," I said, keeping my voice even, "do you see me as family?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's a strange question to start the day with." I didn't blink. "I'm just wondering. You've known me a long time." She stirred her coffee, added 2 sugars, then replied, "I see you as essential. You've been dependable. That's rare these days." "That's not the same as being family." She sipped. "Let's not play games. You're not blood, Rain. You're not legacy. You're help. Loyal help, but help nonetheless." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I had expected nothing more. "Then help is all I'll be," I said. "For now." I didn't slam a door. I didn't toss her mug in the sink. I just picked up the paper, folded it, and walked to the hallway. That afternoon, I began my own collection. Retirement statements, grocery receipts with my debit card number, tax forms that listed me as a filer, not just a dependent. I combed through email archives, tracking every confirmation for hospital appointments I scheduled, therapists I rescheduled, transportation I paid for. I created a spreadsheet. At the top, I typed, "Personal contributions, not family expense." It was clinical, maybe even cold, but it was accurate. I didn't embellish. I didn't round up or down. Each line item was a truth I had swallowed for years, now spit back onto the page. As I typed, I thought of Vera's voice, how certain she sounded when she said I wasn't legacy. how quickly she reduced me to function. I didn't cry, I formatted, I aligned columns, I double-checked dates. By evening, the file was complete, 26 pages long. I printed a copy and slid it into a blank white envelope. In bold black ink, I wrote, "To whom it may concern." Then I walked to the kitchen, where Marlon had just finished loading the dishwasher. He didn't look up. I placed the envelope beside his coffee mug, next to the napkin he used every morning. He finally asked, "What's this?" I didn't stop walking as I passed. "Just something for the files." They ignored what I placed on the table, so I took back what they had always borrowed. By Sunday, the air had turned sharp and dry. Vera had been home from the hospital for less than a week, and somehow it warranted another full family gathering. "Just something light," Celine had said over the phone. "Nothing fancy," which meant I would cook, set the table, vacuum, and make it all look like it had just magically appeared out of thin air. By 10 that morning, I had thawed the chicken, chopped vegetables, ironed the table runner, and lit the cinnamon-scented candles Vera liked to pretend she couldn't smell. Marlon came through the kitchen just once to grab a bottle of water and mumbled, "Let me know if you need help," as he walked away. He didn't wait for a reply. Around noon, the door opened, and in floated Celine with her hair blown out and a gift bag looped over her wrist. Oran came shortly after, carrying nothing but a bottle of cheap white wine and a smirk that said he'd done enough just by showing up. The table filled with chatter. Celine talked about her new spa expansion. Oran shared a client story that made everyone laugh. Vera sat at the head of the table, basking in the attention, sipping tea with two hands like a monarch. I brought in the casserole, the salad, the warm bread, then stood back as Celine handed Vera a wrapped box. "When Mom had that scare, I wired funds so fast the nurse was shocked," Celine announced, loud enough for the whole room. I blinked. The nurse had called me, not her. I had pulled $3,000 from my own savings and paid up front so they wouldn't delay admission. Celine hadn't even returned my call that day. Marlon leaned back and smiled. "Yeah, Celine saved the day." I didn't say a word. I stepped out of the room, walked down the hall, and opened the drawer of my desk. The manila folder was already waiting, labeled, organized, deliberate. I returned to the table and walked straight to Vera. I placed the folder beside her glass of water. No dramatic motion, no pointed stare, just quiet, surgical precision. "What's this?" she asked, her fingers barely grazing the paper. "Since you're all discussing money," I said, "I thought accuracy might matter." The room fell silent. Forks hovered midair. Oran cleared his throat. Celine looked at me like I had spilled soup in her lap. Marlon reached for the folder but hesitated. "That's not necessary, Rain," he muttered. I looked at him, calm and steady. Neither was rewriting history. Vera didn't even blink. "Well, don't be petty, dear. It's not about credit." "No," I said. "Then stop taking what I've paid for." No one touched the folder. It sat there like a dropped match in a dry room. After dinner, the family moved to the living room. I stayed in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes that were already clean. My hands moved on their own, my mind somewhere else, somewhere further. I knew what I had to do. That night, after everyone left and the house fell into its usual hush, I went to my room. I opened the bottom drawer and began to pack. Not clothes, those could come later, but documents, my laptop, the scrapbook, a notebook I hadn't touched in years. I placed the manila folder back inside my satchel. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't huff or cry. I just moved, slow and quiet. Like someone locking the front door behind her for the last time without ever making a sound. When they start pretending you were never there, you take proof with you. By midnight, I sat on the edge of my bed, the door slightly ajar. Marlon passed by once. He paused, saw the open suitcase, the empty envelope on the bed marked final copy. He didn't ask. He just stood there, and then walked on. I didn't slam the door, but the silence behind me made more noise than they expected. 2 days passed. No one brought up the envelope. The folder that had been placed with care, right in front of Vera, disappeared sometime that evening, though no one admitted touching it. Marlon acted like it never existed. Celine sent a cheery text about a neighborhood fundraiser. Oren never acknowledged it at all. That Wednesday, the air in the house felt different. Lighter in some ways, like I had shifted a weight I didn't know I had the right to carry. But also heavier because nothing had changed, not in their minds. And that's when I realized silence had been my mistake. Late morning, I prepared Vera's lunch. Chicken broth, no onions, white rice, just the way she always demanded it. I stirred it slow, even though my mind was already on the meeting I had that afternoon. I ladled the soup into her usual porcelain bowl, the one with the chipped rim she refused to throw away, and carried it into her room. She barely looked up. "This isn't the red one Celine brought last week," she muttered, sniffing it like it might betray her. "It's the same recipe," I said softly, placing the tray down. She kept her eyes on the TV. "Tell her to bring the red one again. I only trust what she makes." I didn't argue. I just stood there, watching the woman I'd fed, bathed, and protected for years deny a bowl of soup I had made every week for 2 decades. "Celine didn't make that soup," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I did, every time." She didn't flinch, just turned up the volume on her program. I left the tray untouched, walked out, closed the door with the kind of precision people reserve for important things. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting across from an attorney at a small local firm, the manila folder open between us. "You've got more documentation than most contested divorces," he said, flipping through the pages. I didn't smile. "I didn't start this to win something," I replied. "I just needed proof that I was here." He nodded. "You're ready." I signed the paperwork, filed for divorce, requested an emergency clause that would give me the right to safely remove my belongings from the house without interference. That evening, I made dinner, but left the table early. I didn't say much. I didn't have to. Marlon looked uneasy, like he knew something was coming but couldn't name it. We sat in silence, me in the kitchen, him watching TV like nothing in his life was unraveling. The next morning, he found the second envelope. "Filing confirmed. Divorce pending." I was folding laundry when he stormed into the bedroom. "Are you serious? After everything?" I folded another shirt. "Everything?" I asked. "What exactly have you been giving?" He blinked like I had slapped him. "I go to work," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's where you disappear for hours at a time and return with nothing useful but excuses." He stood there, jaw tight. Then turned and left, not slamming the door, just exiting. But it was the first time I saw something resembling uncertainty in his body. By Friday, Celine and Oren called for what they labeled a family conversation. We gathered in the living room. Vera sat in her chair, lips pursed, eyes scanning everyone but me. Marlon leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Celine spoke first, her voice laced with concern, dressed as sugar. "Rain, we all just want to understand where this is coming from. You've seemed different." "I stopped pretending," I said. Oren raised an eyebrow. "So this is about inheritance?" I looked directly at him. "No, this is about identity. You built a world where I did all the work but was never invited in." Celine tensed. "That's not fair." I cut her off. "It's exact." I pulled out copies of my spreadsheet from the folder I had packed and handed them each a set. "Here's what I did, what I covered." What I was never asked to do, but did anyway. They didn't move. Vera finally spoke. "What's your end game, Rain? Want us to clap for you?" I looked at her for a long time. "No. I just want to stop disappearing in front of people who claim to see me." And with that, I stood. No dramatics, no raised voice, just truth, placed like another folder on the table. That night, I packed 2 suitcases, just what I needed. My laptop, my notebooks, the original documents, a few clothes. Sanchia's message blinked on my phone. "Room's ready when you are." I walked through the living room with both bags. Marlon was on the couch. He looked up but didn't speak. Vera sat in silence, her eyes not following me. I left the final folder on the dining table. Vera called out behind me, her voice hoarse, brittle. "You'll regret this." I paused at the door. "Maybe," I said, "but I won't regret leaving." And then I walked out. The next morning, I arrived at Sanchia's place to the smell of lemon tea and something I hadn't felt in years: welcome. Her bookstore sat on the edge of downtown Spokane, tucked between a florist and a small art gallery. The apartment upstairs was modest: slanted ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked in comforting ways, and a single window that looked out onto the street where life went on, oblivious and free. She handed me a small envelope with a key and a sticky note attached. "You're not invisible here," it read. I ran my fingers over the words like they were carved in stone. I hadn't cried during the move. I didn't cry when Vera refused my soup or when Marlon asked if I was serious. But that note nearly cracked me. Unpacking didn't take long. I had only brought what mattered: laptop, records, my worn-out copy of the scrapbook, 2 sweaters, and the kind of silence that follows a woman who's been holding her breath for 2 decades. I made a cup of tea, sat at the tiny desk beneath the window, and opened my laptop. I titled the document, "From Needed to Noticed." The first line came easily. "For 20 years I organized, cleaned, comforted, scheduled, translated, folded, ferried, defended, fed, and held together a family that never once asked how I was doing." I wrote for hours. My fingers didn't ache. My spine didn't tighten. Words poured out like breath returning after suffocation. I didn't try to sound poetic. I didn't wrap my pain in soft language. I was clear, unsentimental, exact. I listed what I had done, what I had endured, what I had accepted, and why I finally stopped. That night, I uploaded the post to a simple blog platform. I didn't expect anything, but the next morning, the email notifications hadn't stopped blinking since dawn. People shared it, then reshared it, then reshared it again. Thousands of women, some older, some not, wrote comments like, "I felt every word," or "I thought I was the only one," or simply, "Thank you." A journalist from a local paper reached out, then a regional publication, then someone from Seattle. But one email stood out. It came from the planning team of a women's legal summit. "We'd like to invite Rain Trask to speak on care labor and invisible sacrifice. No panel, just you." I read the email 5 times. Then I hit yes. 2 weeks later, I stood backstage at the conference in Seattle. I wore a soft gray sweater, simple black slacks, no makeup beyond mascara. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to appear, fully. Finally, the host's voice rang through the speakers. "Please welcome Rain Trask, caregiver, advocate, and now, voice for the unseen." I walked out. No applause, just eyes, curious, open, waiting. I stepped up to the podium. "For 20 years, I began. I made meals, changed sheets, organized pillboxes, called ambulances, signed release forms, and disappeared a little more every day." A breath passed through the room. not gasps, just presence. This is not a revenge story, I continued. This is a reappearance. I didn't cry, neither did they, but no one looked away. When I finished, a woman in the front row stood and clapped, then another and another, until the room echoed with the kind of sound I hadn't known belonged to me. Back in Spokane, word traveled quietly. Vera saw my face on the local news, quiet profile, no bitterness, just clarity. Marlon overheard two co-workers talking about an article titled, "The Woman Who Left Quietly." They didn't realize she had been his wife. Celine texted, "That was powerful. Hope you're well." I stared at the screen, then deleted it without replying. Sanchia handed me a printout of one of the online comments that had gone viral. It read, "Your words, Rain. They're not just yours anymore. They belong to all of us who thought silence was strength." That night, I sat at the windowsill of my room above the bookstore. There was a wooden plaque leaning against the glass. Sanchia had placed it there while I was out buying groceries. It said, "Rain's space, quiet, seen. Free." I sipped my tea, clicked open a new blank page on my laptop, and typed. What they never saw was the woman who had already left before she ever walked away. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the hospital with a name I hadn't spoken in a month. Vera. I found it in the mailbox at Sanchia's shop, tucked between a water bill and a local event flyer. The envelope was thin, clinical, the kind of envelope that never brings anything soft. I opened it slowly on the small cafe table by the window, the steam from my tea fogging the edge of the glass. Patient, Vera Kittredge, readmitted, no family contact established. Current legal guardian, Marlon Kittredge, reached but non-responsive. The final line was underlined in pen. "She's been asking for you." I set the letter down, folded it once, and placed it beneath my teacup. My fingers tapped the rim, not from nervousness, but to remind myself I had a choice now. Sanchia glanced up from behind the counter, sensing the stillness. "Everything okay?" "She's back in the hospital," I said. "They can't reach Marlon." "She's asking for you?" I nodded. "Apparently." "Are you going to go?" I took a breath. "She knows where I am. She's just not used to being told no." That afternoon, I walked to the corner florist and ordered a bouquet. Wildflowers, no lilies, no roses. Nothing dramatic, just something that looked like it had grown by accident in a field no one owned. "Would you like to include a card?" the young clerk asked, pen poised. I shook my head. "No, she'll know." I didn't visit. I didn't send a follow-up. That was all. Later that week, Sanchia and I were having dinner, just lentil soup and crackers, when she asked, gently, "You sure you're all right not seeing her again?" "I saw more than enough," I said. "I was the one watching her every day. She never once looked back." There was nothing left to say. The world kept moving. I kept editing. From my desk near the window, I worked with women around the country, older women, most of them quiet, most of them angry in the way only forgotten people can be. Together, we built a little online group called Seen Not Silent. No photos, just words. One day, a package arrived. Inside was a carved wood plaque, rough around the edges, wrapped in old newspaper, a note in blue ink. For the woman who left with no applause, just freedom. It was from Sandra, one of the women I'd mentored through the forum. She lived in Missouri, raised 4 kids, and had only recently started writing again after 30 years of caregiving. I hung it over my desk. That simple. One afternoon, while editing a short memoir for a woman from New Jersey, I got an email from Marlon. Subject line, "Just wanted to say." I hesitated, then clicked. I've been hearing things. People saying I let you down. That's not fair. You never said anything was wrong. I thought we were okay. I just thought you were tired, that's all. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the window. No response. A day later, Celine posted something on her social media, one of those vague, self-pitying rants about how family doesn't always understand legacy, accompanied by a black and white photo of Vera in her 20s. The comments did not go well. One woman replied, "Sounds like your brother's ex-wife told her story, and we believe her." Another said, "Funny how some people shine once the shadows leave the room." The post disappeared within the hour. Oren's name surfaced on a legal blog days later. Ethics violation. His firm dropped him. I didn't need details. I just saved the article to my bookmarks folder labeled "Things They Never Thought I'd See." Spring came early. The buds bloomed along the bookstore's windowsill, soft and pink and eager to prove they had survived the frost. One morning, I stepped into the bookstore with a fresh coffee in one hand and a short stack of printed stories in the other. I waved at Sansia, who was arranging bookmarks near the register. "I think you got another letter," she said, pointing to a brown envelope by my keyboard upstairs. I climbed the stairs, poured the rest of my coffee into a mug, and sat. The envelope was blank, no sender. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, in Vera's handwriting, neat, shaky, stubborn, was a line. "I don't know how to say I'm sorry." I stared at it. Not anger, not even forgiveness, just finality. I placed it in the drawer beneath Sandra's plaque and closed it. Then I picked up my journal and wrote, "I was never trying to win. I was just trying not to vanish." Later, I helped a customer choose a novel about second chances. She asked for a recommendation, and I pointed her toward a shelf labeled "Quiet but Strong." Senchia gave me a smile across the counter. I stepped outside to sweep the sidewalk. The sky was clear. The air was soft. I held the door open for a man coming in with a box of used books, and for once, no one looked at me. And that was okay, because this part of my story belonged to me. I left nothing behind but the silence they never respected, until it was gone. Sometimes it's not the loudest goodbye that leaves the deepest mark. It's the quiet walk away with your dignity intact. Rain didn't leave with anger. She left with proof, with clarity. And maybe that's the most powerful revenge of all. Choosing yourself when no one else will. Have you ever stayed too long where you weren't seen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories that speak to the heart.